She says she's not in, shouts warning that she wouldn't die under any circumstances. He then smiles and says that if that's the case, he has a way to make her useful. If she helps him with the work he needs done, she will also receive protection in the meantime. And if she has a family, you would take care of them too. However, Layla misunderstands and asks if, by any chance, he's threatening her family. He stands up with that dumbfounded look on his face. He tells her not to misunderstand because if he wanted to, he would have killed her already. Assassins like her are everywhere. The girl knows that's true. To be noble like him, she is nothing more than a tool. You then ask why he wants her and not someone else. There must be some reason he's going through all this trouble to persuade her. Our guy says the first reason is because it would be too much work to find someone else. And the other is because of something she said to him earlier. You then leave saying that before explaining why, he would give her a minute. If she didn't agree with him within that time, she'd be free to pursue the freedom she so craved. However, Layla knows the truth is that this freedom will cost her life. Here's her only option because leaving that place shall be killed by the other family. She didn't want to agree with that cute little runt, but at this moment, she had no choice. And with great determination, she says she understands. Considering the conflict between the two families, she benefits more by helping Shiking. Our boy smiles and says that she's finally starting to think straight. However, she puts her hand on her waist and says she's not going to be a subordinate. She wants to be hired as a regular mercenary instead. And she would make sure the runt like him bossing her around. Suddenly, Krat jumps in and orders her to start respecting the young master. She apologizes and says she's just joking now that they're on the same team. There's no need for him to act like that. Or we see the type of person who likes hitting his allies. Poor Krat just gets even angrier and the two start to clash again. Suddenly, Krat asks her about something she mentioned the other day. The Hoshia and family training grounds located in the lands of Golda. She remembers saying that to him and asks what this information has to do with anything. But Krat interrupts her and tells Krat that he needs a map of the entire area surrounding those grounds. Because the little Mackie has only you can see in the small window. Krat says there's a giant map in the military council area. He pushes our boy, telling him to go. However, looking back, he sees that our guy is just standing there, grinning at the front. Krat immediately asks if, by any chance, he doesn't know the way. And Calyx says he does know. But he prefers having someone protect him from the front. Meanwhile, Layla is standing there with a dumbfounded look, non-understanding, they're bickering. Sometime later in the castle, they finally arrive in the war room. Our boy is all gleaming as he looks around. And Krat says that all the greatest military secrets of the continent of Eleanor are there. Our boy starts looking for the lands of Golda. Upon finding it, he asks if they know about that place. Krat says it's a well-known area. There's an ongoing territorial dispute between the Hoshran family and the Baron of the Aribon family. The reason for the conflict is some high-quality copper mines. Our boy asks if Baron Aribon is on their side and the guy confirms it. He then makes a dumbfounded face, wanting to know how accurate and updated the map is. Layla says it seems a bit outdated, but there have been significant changes. At that moment, however, she realizes why she was brought there. Our boy then asks if she can navigate just by looking at the map, and she says of course. She spent her entire childhood playing in that region. But she wants to know why he's so interested in the lands of Golda. He explains that there are some ancient ruins he intends to explore. She looks a bit confused and says there's nothing like that in that place. Calyx looks thoughtful and asks if, by chance, adults didn't talk about places where she shouldn't go. She pauses and then says she remembers something like that. At this, Calyx asks when the Hoshran family started training troops there. She says she doesn't understand why he's asking, but since she's of the 6th rank at least 15 years have passed. He asks when the territorial dispute began. Akrot says that also started 15 years ago. At this, Layla suddenly nudges him asking if he understands where the boy is going with this. He replies that he doesn't, and she feels devastated to have an idiot beside her. Once again, they start bickering. Until Calix interrupts them and says that training an army costs a lot of money. They wouldn't have started creating those troops out of nowhere without an important reason. Once again, the dumb girl asks what the boy's point is. The Crot tells her to realize quickly that this means that somehow they managed to obtain a lot of money. Calix says that's exactly it. 15 years ago, the Hosharan family found a new source of income, and they likely used that money to train their new armies. Once the troops were ready, they were dispatched to numerous territories. Exactly as happened with Layla. She says she understands, but what would be the connection between that source of money and the ruins he's looking for? Calix says that silver mines are often found alongside copper mines. Besides that, some copper ores can also contain traces of silver. Calix asks if he's suggesting that the Hosharan family is secretly mining silver, and that would be an extremely serious crime. Calix says yes and tells him to think about it. The law of this place stated that any gold or silver found always belonged to the royal family. No matter where it was located, however, it would be foolish to believe that every noble would be that fair. Crot asks what the connection to the ruins is, and our boy says he already knows what kind of ruins they are. Perfect ones to hide this type of secret. Unfortunately, he can't reveal to Crot that he already has some information about this. Layla, who's really growing into a sharp girl, asks what all of this has to do with them. She thought it was impossible for him to attack that place because she can't territory didn't have the resources for that. Crot gets frustrated thinking that as much as he hates to hear it, this is the truth. And she insists saying that even if they started a war, as soon as the royal family knew it was pure silver, they'd take everything. Calix says they wouldn't gain anything by passing this information to someone else. Besides, his territory is on the verge of collapse. Both of them stand there dumbfounded, wanting to know what he's suggesting then. That's when he says that since they obtained the money illegally, even if they stole everything, the Hosharans wouldn't dare report it to the crown. Later that same day at night, it gathered outside the castle. Russell told our boy that it was madness to take someone as inexperienced as Crot on this mission. He should think more about this plan because acting hastily could be dangerous. Calix agrees that it would be safer with Russell at his side. But a young talent like Crot also needed to develop. The poor fool blushes if the Lord's confidence in him. Calix continues saying that it would be too risky for both of them to leave the territory at a time like this. Russell is surprised and then apologizes. Suddenly, he turns to Crot and tells him he better follow the young master diligently. But the fool just agrees with his tongue handing out. Even Russell gives him a smack on the head, telling him to take it seriously. Some time later he calls everyone together. It explains that the young master's wounds are still fresh. But even so, he planned this expedition for the good of the territory. So all the soldiers there better follow him faithfully. Calix knows that no soldier wants to follow someone so weak who once tried to take his own life. Following the loyalty of those people was also his job. Meanwhile, Layla is just quietly observing from the corner. Some time later they approach you well. Crot goes down and our boy follows right behind him. Upon reaching the bottom, he says that by following this tunnel, they would be able to exit the castle. However, it was farther than he had imagined. Calix just passes by and tells them to hurry up. With that, the team begins walking through the darkness of the cave. Some time later, Crot looks up and says they finally arrived. Obviously, our boy is exhausted. Crot opens the cover and offers his hand to help our boy up. Suddenly, he finds himself on the outside or rather inside a house. Crot explains that this is an old watermill and has been abandoned a long time ago. Already outside, our boy is impressed. He had already prepared several supply horses. Crot calls in Lord and tells him to get on the horse. But Calix tells him to stop using that kind of title in this place. It would be stupid to call him Lord outside the castle when they're heading toward hostile territory. From Moani's to call him only young master. The army guys put on peasant clothes. But he's still not sure if that's enough to fool anyone. At that, he calls for Crot and asks if he prepared everything he requested. He says yes, but seems a bit hesitant. He pulls out a stinky cloak and asks if he really has to wear something like this. Our boy says that if he wants, he can wear a porter's outfit. But then Calix will have to play the role of Layla's new lead husband. Crot immediately says there's no way he's letting the young lord stand next to an assassin. When he says that, everyone turns to stare at her. Calix realizes the fool is talking more than he should again. He stomps off angrily while thinking that he didn't say single lie. But since Calix asks, he gives her his hand and asks if my Layla would go with him. But she just tells him to stop calling her that and get out of the way. Calix notices that the two of them don't have the best relationship. Somehow, he needed to calm down his team members. That's because they do like this would be very useful if they had synergy. But if they kept fighting each other, things would only escalate. Eventually, one would die or leave the team. It's strange how Heroes of Destiny, which was supposed to be just a simple game, felt so real.